Hey, how's it going everyone? It's me, it's Conscienceula. Welcome to today's Pokemon Go video. Today we're going to be talking about Stardust, more specifically how you should be spending it in Pokemon Go. Stardust is a finite resource and it's also incredibly important. It's basically going to be your way for progression in Pokemon Go. If you want to get ahead when it comes to raid battles or PvP, you need to get yourself a ton of Stardust, and you will want to spend that Stardust on the right Pokemon. Now, in this video, I'm not necessarily going to be going over what the best of the best Pokemon are for both PvP and PvE. That would make this video absolutely egregiously long, but instead, I'm going to be telling you what you should be doing when you're spending your Stardust and how you should be looking out for certain Pokemon that are going to be worth that Stardust. So, first and foremost, let's talk about what kind of Pokemon you should be investing into. Yeah, there's going to be very few Pokemon that are actually going to be useful in just about every aspect of the game. But of course, even if you have these specific Pokemon, you still do not want to waste your Stardust and candies on them. You will want to look out for something called perfect IVs. These are Pokemon that have a perfect appraisal. When you appraise every single Pokemon, some of them are going to be perfect, which means they're going to have something that looks like this. And that's going to be extremely important because that means this is going to be the absolute best variant of that Pokemon. So it's going to be worth investing into. Now, the next thing you should look out for is meta-relevant Pokemon. What do I mean by that? Well, there's going to be certain Pokemon that are going to be really good for PvP, and there's also going to be Pokemon that are going to be really good for raiding and gym battles and Team Go Rocket battles. These Pokemon typically do not overlap. You do not often see a Pokemon that's going to be really good for PvP, but also really good for non-PvP content. So you will want to do your research. You will want to find out what Pokemon are really good in the meta, and those are the Pokemon you should invest into. Some of the PvP Pokemon that I've invested into that have been really good for me include Pokemon like Medicham and Skarmory. Those are Pokemon that have always proven to be useful in PvP. And something to keep in mind is that the meta is constantly shifting, and that is because new Pokemon are constantly being introduced, and there's going to be move shakeups with every season. So if a Pokemon is considered the top ranked Pokemon one season, it may be bumped down to the top 8 or top 10th rank in the next season. So that's something you should keep in mind. When it comes to PvP, you're going to be constantly spending Stardust. So you will want to make sure you spend into Pokemon that you probably will be using every season. But when it comes to non-PvP content like raid battles, as well as gym battles, as well as Team Go Rocket battles, certain Pokemon are always going to be top tier. It's very easy to look up what these Pokemon are, as pretty much any online guide is going to list out some of the best ones for each type. But some of the Pokemon that I've invested into and have proven to be always useful include Pokemon like Mewtwo, Shadow Mewtwo, Rayquaza, Kyogre and Groudon, Terrakion, as well as Dialga. These are some of the Pokemon that have always been useful for every aspect of Pokemon Go, so I do suggest you start there. But of course, these are Pokemon that are extremely difficult to get, considering that they are legendaries. If you want to know what non-legendary Pokemon you should invest into, there are Pokemon like Swampert, which are always going to be really good. Gyarados is another really good one, as well as Venusaur. And almost every single pseudo-legendary like Metagross, Dragonite, and Tyranitar are always going to be useful, so they are definitely Pokemon worth investing into. So yeah, when it comes to spending Stardust on Pokemon, make sure you're checking those IVs and checking to see what the meta is. Now, something else you should be very well aware of is that Stardust is a finite resource. You're only going to get so much Stardust every single day, so you will want to make sure you're not ever wasting Stardust. Don't ever just power up a specific Pokemon just so you can complete a field research task or a special research. Make sure you plan it out in advance. If there's going to be a specific Pokemon that you do plan to power up, always have it in the back burner to be powered up for these tasks. So that way, you're not wasting any Stardust, and you're always going to be spending on Pokemon that you are for sure going to use. Like for example, myself, I had a couple of Pokemon that I had on hand that I always planned to power up. And those are Pokemon that I did not max out right away, but I would power them up little by little every time I got a field research task or a special research task that required me to power up a Pokemon, and you do get that task quite frequently. So this is something that you should definitely try out. If you're going to be spending Stardust, make sure you plan ahead and have certain Pokemon that you for sure will be powering up. And this is not necessarily something that a lot of players will agree with, but try to avoid maxing out certain Pokemon right away, even if you have enough candies, because chances are you might come across a better IV of that Pokemon later on down the road, and for the most part you don't even need to max it out to the highest level in order to get the best use out of it. Like for raid battles, there's something called breakpoints, which in layman's terms means that it is a point where your Pokemon will deal the maximum amount of damage even if it is not completely maxed out. That is going to be important to know for certain Pokemon, because not only will you be saving Stardust by not powering it up beyond what it needs to be, but you're also going to be saving Stardust for when you might end up getting a higher IV. That's always something that typically happens, especially when it comes to legendary raids. If you have yourself a 96% IV of a particular legendary, for example, later on down the road when that legendary returns to raids, you might end up getting yourself a 98% or even a 100%. And in that case, you will want to power up that one. So these are some of the things you need to keep in mind when it comes to playing Pokemon Go. Spending Stardust should be something you do very rarely, and you should always try to accumulate as much Stardust as you can so that you always have them on hand for when you eventually get a very powerful Pokemon to power up. Or if you want to dive into PvP, you will have Stardust on hand to power up the Pokemon you need to power up. That's a very key part of Pokemon Go's gameplay, having a lot of Stardust on hand so that you could use it on a whim. So yeah, that's basically going to be it. These are just some of the tips that I have when it comes to spending Stardust. I have myself a ton of Pokemon that I've maxed out over the years, and I have a ton of PvP Pokemon as well, but I was only able to accomplish that by saving my Stardust, not spending it on Pokemon I don't need to. Of course, I've gotten to a point where I am spending Stardust on Pokemon where I don't need to, but it's only because I already have top counters for raids as well as a bunch of PvP Pokemon, so it's okay if I spend Stardust here and there on Pokemon that don't need it. Like for example, some Shundos that I might pick up from community days, or Pokemon that I just think are really cool. Yeah, I'll spend Stardust on those Pokemon, but you really shouldn't be doing that, even if you are a veteran player with a ton of Stardust. Always be saving it and make sure you spend it on the right Pokemon. That's basically the biggest tip I can give you. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding Stardust down below. What is your biggest tip for spending or obtaining Stardust? I would love to know what that is, and let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it to this point in the video. If you ended up enjoying it and found it to be helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here, as well as that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to every single patron on my Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the ConscienceLoa channel, the easiest way you could do so is by clicking on the links in the description below. One of them will take you to my Patreon page, and if you become a paid member, you will get a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. That way, you can get remote raid invites from me, we could build up our friendship levels, and then possibly do lucky trades in the future. So yeah, do not miss out on that. Make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way, you could always do so by following me on social media. My handle is @ConscienceLoa, and I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. And yeah, with that said, that's going to be it for this video. I'm ConscienceLoa. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.